Let's go.
Welcome to the Trusted Leader Show. I'm your host, David Horsager. Join me as I sit down with influential leaders from around the world to discuss why leaders and organizations fail, top tactics for high performance, and how you can become an even more trusted leader. Welcome to the Trusted Leader Show. It's David Horsager. I have a special, authentic guest. She's in New Zealand today. Welcome to the show, Juliet Funt.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, this is going to be great. People are going to learn so much. They're going to have takeaways, but I want to just tell just a little bit about you. Juliet is CEO of the Juliet Funt Group. She has spoken around the world. She's known as the tough love advisor to Fortune 500 companies. She's worked with everything from Costco to Pepsi to Nike to Wells Fargo to National Geographic and ESPN and way more. And, I'm excited. She's an author of a fantastic new book. We're going to talk about it. But, one more time, thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to get into this together.
Thanks. It's going to be awesome.
Well, before we get into all that you've done, what are you doing right now? What are you thinking about these days?
That's my favorite question right now, because we are doing the best new way of working in 2022, and I can't stop talking about it. So 2022 for our company, we have decided to be the year of no new things. And we are doing nothing new. We are creating no new products. We are building no new partnerships. We are finessing no new markets. We are hiring no new teams, because the last 18 months, we just have built so much. And we have all this wonderful stuff, and we want to spread it in the world before we build anything new. And I have to tell you that first we did this, we said, okay, this is a good idea. And then the ecstasy of this idea has built every single time I say, a year. All we're going to do is make the things we already have a little bit better, get them out a little further, relax. And I feel like it's turning into a template. I just have to discipline myself that we don't decide that 2023 needs to be the second year of no new things, because it's going to be so awesome.
Stay the way you were, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fun. Well, I love it. I think we should dig right in. I have so many things I want to ask you, and we've even talked about offline. Personally, we're both entrepreneurs. We both lead our teams and companies, and we try to make an impact in the world. But let's jump in a little bit to your new book, because it's really cool. It's called A Minute to Think. People can get it anywhere. We'll put it in the show notes, trustedleadershow.com, and everywhere you can find Juliet. But let's talk about this idea to start with, about, you talk about space and oxygen to fuel the fire. Tell us about it.
That's the foundational metaphor of the book and of everything that we do. So the idea is, if you're building a fire, you need the right ingredients. It's clear that you need something dry and crumbly, newspaper, pine needles. You have to have good wood. I've learned soft wood to catch quick and hard wood to burn long is the perfect combination. But there is an ingredient that, if missed, will absolutely sabotage every effort that you make to turn a spark into a beautiful blaze. And that is, you must add space. There must be oxygenating passages in between those materials for the feeding of the fire to occur. And the truth is that this is exactly the same for us and our minds and creativity and ideas and work. We need space around them for that oxygenating power to infuse the spark and make it into a blaze. But it is what we forget. It is what we're chronically missing. And in my opinion, that space is the most endangered element now of modern work.
That's so interesting. In the first book, my first book, Trust Edge, I wrote about, and really this was inspired by my wife, to full credit, but we talked about how music is nothing without the rest, right? It doesn't sound beautiful. If you just had all the sounds, it would kind of just be noise. But the rest makes it beautiful. And, we talk about how people are, even after this, or in the process of the change of the pandemic, people are like ready to get out, and not even pausing to think, but what did I learn that I could think about ahead, for the future? I think a pause, even macro, would be valuable. But let's talk about this, because you've been challenged plenty of times, and I know you're tough and can handle it.
Baby.
You've got the CEO sitting there saying, yes, but I need my people to work more. We got to get more done. We got quarterly earnings. We got this issue. We got that issue. What do you mean you're going to come in and tell my people we need more space? Tell us about it.
The misconception of white space, actually there's about 3 main misconceptions of this open time at work that's called white space, the interstitial, interlaced, beautiful, thoughtful time. And one of the biggest misconceptions is that it is only for rest. And if you think that space is only for rest, if you think that everyone's just drooling with their, staring out a window, recuperating, then I can understand as a leader where you wouldn't want that to be the dominant usage of space within the workday. It is absolutely critical when 52% of people are burnt out. And when we have so much shame around rest and refueling, we absolutely need some of it. But the truth is it's only 25%, 1/4 of the way that smart people use space at work. Space is also where strategy occurs. It's where innovation and creativity blossom from inception to true idea. It's where leaders can be objective and step back and look from a distance at something that they're about to execute and see if it has validity. So when you do understand that space is also what facilitates thinking, and that thinking is time well spent, you begin to disconnect from that, isn't this just a soft skill, soft thing that my people don't need misconception? Because without it, your ideas, your strategy, your planning are all threatened because they're going to be thin and unconsidered.
So before I get into a tip with that, how do I tell if I'm burnt out? You said 52% of people are. How do I even know if my people are burnt out?
You asked 2 different questions. You said, how do I know if I'm burnt out? And how do I know if my people are burnt out? So the question of, am I burnt out personally, individually, is an interesting one because we spend a lot of time trying to decide if the label formally should stick to us or not. But to me, it doesn't matter if you have crossed the invisible line between wicked fried and technically burnt. It doesn't matter if you are burnt. What matters is that if you are even asking the question, I wonder if I'm burnt out. It's kind of like, I wonder if I'm an alcoholic. There's something that is stimulating, some pain, some awareness, some objectivity about your own day that is stimulating the question. That is sufficient. It means you're fried, you're exhausted, you probably used adrenaline and courage to push past levels of, earnest work that would have been sufficient a long time ago. So if you are feeling that, then there are things that you can do, and we can go into those. Organizationally, if my people are burnt out, that's a different question. And I'm sure you've heard of the term skip level meeting, where the big boss skips their direct reports and then has a meeting with the direct reports. That's called a skip level meeting. But we like skip levels meetings, plural. I would like the big boss to go have lunch with people 5 rungs down in the organization, or have a virtual meeting if you can't, and say, just tell me, what does it feel like? What's driving you crazy? What are you pretending is okay that's really completely not okay? Are you thinking of leaving? Why are you thinking of leaving? The Great Resignation, we're only seeing people from their backsides as they're leaving. We got to get ahead of that. So the idea of leaders using the new intimacy of COVID, this way that we've all become more real with each other, to go in there and say, I'm going to make a vulnerable admission. Here's where I'm struggling. Here's where I'm confused. Here's where it's been hard for me. What about you? What about you? And opening that doorway, that's the only way you're ever going to know.
That's brilliant. What about how are you doing this? Like, how do you keep the white space? You're running a company. You're putting out some amazing work. You're running. You've got your family. You got your life. You're traveling. You're in New Zealand. You're back in the U.S. in a month. I mean, how do you? Maybe even just jumping into some tips and takeaways that we can all use. But how do you do it?
The most important piece of white space for me is the very first thing in the morning. And everybody can just start here. This is the easiest way to start. Make sure you have a minute to think between opening your eyes and getting out of bed. It's such a simple and beautiful interval to just pause and use what we call a strategic pause. What kind of day is this going to be? What do I need to shake off from yesterday or from a bad dream? What anxiety is just waking up right with me because it's been such a difficult time that I need to take a breath and let go of? And how do I want to show up today? And then maybe another sip at your desk. And then maybe through the course of the day, you take advantage of forced white space that is thrown upon you. Maybe that rainbow spinning ball can be your friend instead of your enemy, or you're waiting in line. Instead of reaching for the phone, start realizing that there are a lot of times where we're gifted space and we're waiting or we're thinking. And if we don't pick up that phone to fill it, space is ours for the taking. Now, in terms of a specific tool, this all is training wheels that I've just described to you to get you to the basic starter tool called the wedge. And the wedge, for most of your audio listeners are not going to see me, I'm making a triangle upward with my fingers and I'm pointing upward with this wedge. I want you to imagine a little wedge of open time, unscheduled fluid open time, inserted in between two activities that previously would have been connected. So this is to open up things that would have been touching between a meeting and a meeting, between getting a bad email and responding quickly, between, oh, I have an idea and I'm going to execute on that idea. Just little wedges inserted and opening. And what happens is we begin to have this interstitial space, not the big, scary 30-minute executive block of white space, 1 hour executive block of totally unattainable white space, 3 seconds, 8 seconds, a minute and a half, 5 minutes. And now there starts to be a little bit of oxygen in the system, and that's where we begin.
I remember you speaking when I was listening to you at one point, at least, even kind of making the recommendation. I think this was more recently because with all the Zoom meetings, even saying something about between Zoom meetings, you recommend 10 minutes. Is that right?
Well, there's a cardinal rule, and then you can design a custom application of it. So here's the cardinal rule. Never let the colors touch on your meeting calendar. I want to see a nice stripy calendar from this day forward for every single one of your listeners. If it's 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is, when the colors don't touch, the day can have some oxygenation in it. And as you're going back to the office, if you're used to top of the hour to top of the hour, now you're going to have to move to a different room. We've forgotten how to, how that we're not going to be clicking on and off. So we start with those stripes. And then if you like, we can break down what occurs inside each stripe to really utilize it properly. Shall we go there?
Let's do it.
Okay. Because it's very important. When you have a stripe of white space, it is not intended to just, go on TikTok. That's not the point of the time. The point of the time is to do 3 things that really, really start to change the nature of this maniacal work pace. You look backward, you look within, and you look forward. So in a typical slice of white, let's say we're going to do 10 minutes. About the first 3 minutes should be looking back. Who did I just talk to in the last meeting? Do I need to make a note, enter something, send a calendar invite, or do I just need to think about how did that really go? What could I have done a little bit better with David? Then look within. Time to check into the human being. Am I hungry? Do I need to close my eyes for 30 seconds? Do I have to get ahead of a bio break before the next meeting? And then we look forward, the most important part for business and sales and building relationships. Who am I about to sit with? What human being is going to bop into that waiting room in 3 to 4 minutes? Who do I need to be for them? Because we all have different aspects, different colors of our personality that we bring to light with different people, more casual, more serious, more data filled. And then what do they need? What do they want? And how can I serve them? And so when you do that, look back, look within, and look forward, wow, do you show up as a different human being to that next meeting?
Talk about a way to be more present. Wow. I love it. So any other tips on meetings? I want to ask you about I've heard you speak and seen some of your writing on 2 big thorns for people, I think, listening. And these are getting into the weeds here. We could have talked to so many things to Juliet. We need like 5 episodes, but meetings and emails are thorns for a lot of the people, right? So let's talk a little bit more. Is there anything else with meetings that we should think about as far as creating healthy white space or better meetings?
So much. Yeah, we could do about 5. Let's think about this guy I met named Devin. Devin is a senior executive. He's a definite big shot at a large company. He told me this story when we were writing the book. He said he was sitting in a meeting sequence, large accounting firm. 4 meetings in the course of a day that were all the same presentation. They were these upward approval cycles where you convince the rung and then the next rung and the next rung and the next. He only needed to be in the last meeting. He's the big shot, but they begged him to give the FaceTime of, just sitting in the other ones. And by the 4th meeting, he was reciting the deck. He was mouthing the words. He knew this content so well. There was no tactical reason for him to sit in any of those other meetings. He knew he was wasting his time sitting in those other meetings. He was sneaking peeks in his phone, trying to not be bored. But even with his power and even with his authority, it never even occurred to him to opt out. And if you think about the concept of opting out, if Devin can't do it, I promise you, most of the people sitting at their desk without that kind of agency can't do it. And we have an entire culture of people who never even think about tiptoeing into the world of, I don't think I'll be adding value at this meeting. I'd like to decline. And so if you're going to have the colors not touching as a beginning, we also want to have some places where there are no meetings so we can think and strategize and write and be creative and go deeper and build. And in order for that to happen, there has to be control at 2 junctures. We have to be able to control who we invite, and we have to be able to control what we accept. And for most people, it's the second one I mentioned that is the scariest. Opting out is very intimidating, but it's an absolute necessity in the world of work that we're in. And so the safest way to get used to it is to find what I call a nobody. This is a pal that you say, I'm thinking of saying no to this thing. Can I talk through the way that I'm going to say no to see if it sounds good to you? Does it sound authoritative or high maintenance or receivable to the person that I'm about to say to? And you can practice saying no to meetings. You can even practice saying no to projects or certain client demands. And we need this kind of scaffolding support because we're in a culture of yes. We're in a culture of I win points by being the most miserable in some ways, the Olympics of pain that we're all showing off. And so learning how to opt out and then having the support of a nobody are 2 really important techniques.
The Olympics of pain. We are showing off. It's totally true. We don't need to get medals in that. I've often said the most difficult word or the most important word for leaders is not yes, as many think. It is actually no. The ability to say no creates a space for the best, right? So saying no to good, saying no to this, saying no. But I can tell you, even as you say it, I'm thinking, Juliet's talking to me.
Well, you asked how. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just have an issue myself saying no to certain things.
And we talked. That was what I was going to say. Is we talked at the beginning about our keynote schedules, and you said something like, "I do 100 keynotes," and I would do one. I try for one a month is my goal if I can, but. Everybody has, it's probably one of the ways that I do protect white space. You asked me how I protect mine is I think my boundaries have gotten really, really strong. I definitely have my weaker spots. My tech addicted nature pulls me too quickly into my technology in those moments. But once you start saying no, and once you start seeing the benefit, the incredible benefit. They'll see in the book a tool called the hourglass, which is much too complicated for us to break down on a show that's audio only. But there are techniques that will make saying no easier the first time, and then like riding a bike, and then easier the next time, and even easier and even easier. We just need to build the muscle.
Hey everyone, a quick interruption here to share some big news. April 12th through the 14th, you are invited to the Trusted Leaders Summit. What makes a powerful event is bringing together amazing people in a way that actually makes an impact in the world. We're talking about a get-together that is packed with immediately useful content. You'll hear from top leaders like John Foley, the former lead solo pilot for the Blue Angels, Harvard professor Alison Shapira, and more incredible global experts. Get your tickets before they're gone at trustedleadersummit.com and join us in becoming even more trusted leaders. We can't wait to see you there.
Let's jump into one of those challenges, and I will say this to my benefit: the tech addiction is not my pain point. I run from it all the time when I probably should check it, but it is. We all have different challenges and reasons and whatnot. But let's talk about this tech piece of email, because you've given some great tips and ideas on how we tame, even as you talk about in the book, defeating the email beast. And
Yes.
what are some tips and takeaways we can think about as far as taming that email beast, but not at the expense of relationships that we need to keep?
Sure. The philosophy is more important than the rules. Everybody wants to start with rules. We really need to start. It's like holding a rosary when you don't have a religion. It's backwards. It's the wrong way to start. The philosophy is one of less emotional connection to email. And when we can start releasing emotionally, it reminds me of the story in the book that I love about this guy named Maurice. He had this really relaxed quality about email, even though he was a middle manager in a car company. And middle managers usually get really, really hooked because they feel that pressure from both sides. I asked him how he became so in control. And he said that when he was young and he was selling cars, he was on the floor and they would get these manila envelopes on Monday and Friday. This is pre-email. And it would have all the memos and Xeroxes and updates and things the company thought he should read. And he'd read the Wednesday one like a good little boy. But then by Friday, he hadn't even gotten through it. And he'd get the Friday one. And then they would start stacking up. And then by Wednesday, he's still, et cetera. So he went to this guy, Maurice, old guy on the team. What do you do? And Maurice just smiled and he said, come with me. And he walked him to the parking lot. And he opened the trunk of his car and revealed exactly three things: a case of water, a jack, and a giant box of unopened manila envelopes. And he said, I put the date on it. I throw it in here. If nobody asks me about anything in 3 months, I throw it away. And I tell this story in corporations. People get a little ruffled because they think I'm minimizing the importance of all the stuff coming from the corporate mothership. But the truth is that a lot of it is over communication. And when we can just sort of relax our relationship with how important our email is, then next we can go, okay, now let's try some tools. Interval checking is a dominant tool for every smart person I know, which means you choose when to touch it. Once an hour, at meal times, morning and evening, some form of interval. The more nuanced tool that we really put our whole company around when it comes to email is called the yellow list. The idea of a yellow list is that you need a repository for things that you thought belonged in email, but really don't. Now, when you're about to send an email, what we teach is that you should go first through the decision tree of how time sensitive it is. If you're literally poised about to type and you stop and you say, first of all, is this time sensitive? Because if it's truly time sensitive, it should not be in a digital medium. It should be in a phone call, or I guess a text is digital, but an immediate frame, not an asynchronous medium. Now we've decided it's not time sensitive. You're about to send it. The next question is, should it be an email? Is there a reason? Is this communication email-ish? Does it have an attachment, a forward, a copy, a link, something that lives inside the world of email? If not, most of the time instead, you can put it on a yellow list. And what that is just a document you keep for everybody you relate with frequently. Let's say I have a David yellow list and I have a Jake yellow list. If I can just put it on my yellow list, I'm just going to talk about it with you later. So I'm going to go, oh, I really, really wanted to ask David about that thing about Willow Creek. And then I go, no, I'll just put it on the yellow list. Boom, boom, boom. It gets a little longer. Eventually, maybe once a week, I call you, hey, David, can we have a yellow list debrief? I guess my phone is out of date. I've got my,
Exactly.
and then we just go through it verbally. No threads were created. No CCs were ever added. You can't CC someone on a conversation, big bonus. And you just boom, 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 move through it verbally. Other bonuses. You get to have 3-dimensional communication, which means that if we want to talk about something that's nuanced or difficult or creative, we're going to talk through it in a much more thorough way, being able to speak directly to each other. So this yellow list idea is absolutely at the core of the way we work. It can transform the amount of cumulative email that you get. Yes, caveat, some things need to be in writing, legal, et cetera, but it's by far the exception and not the rule.
Let's go one more step here, because you get into elevating communication. Tell us a bit of how the best teams talk.
The best teams know that you match the medium with the message. We just kind of talked about it a little bit. There are 2-dimensional messages and there are 3-dimensional messages. A 2-dimensional message is static or fact-driven or simple. Meet me at 3:00. Did you send the report? What day is that special offsite? That's two-dimensional. Three-dimensional is, I'm a little upset with the way you behaved in front of that client, or I have a fantastic idea for a new product. Those are three-dimensional topics. They're rich and creative and challenging. They belong in three-dimensional mediums. So 2D belongs in email, text, chats. 3D belongs in face-to-face meetings, phone calls, video conferences. When we have the right medium for the right message, we work far faster and far easier. And when we don't, we have two prices that we pay. If you take 2D content, short, fact-driven content, and you shove it into a 3D medium, that's when you waste time. That's when you're sitting in a meeting going, this could have been a memo, right? That's that old mug. I'm sitting in another meeting that could have been an email. If you take the other direction and you take three-dimensional content, you try to shove it into a 2D medium, that's when you compromise richness. And the reason that you get email threads that are 35 volleys long is because someone's trying to work out the nuance of something difficult in a completely flat medium that doesn't support it.
Let's jump back before we go into you as a leader, which I'm excited about, and a few personal ideas with this limited time that we have. Let's jump back for a moment to the book. A minute to think, everybody. A minute to think. We'll put everything in the show notes at trustedleadershow.com. But anything else you think, oh, maybe this part doesn't get enough attention, or some surprise, or something that's like just maybe a little interesting in the book that we should, there's so much here, a lot that we couldn't cover. Like you said, the hourglass, and so much great stuff. Everybody needs to get the book. By the way, subtitle, Reclaim Creativity, Conquer Busyness, and Do Your Best Work. And who doesn't want to do that? But any little, subtleties before we move on?
Yeah, you are letting me out some of my children that don't get in the spotlight. So that's so super fun. Let's talk about phone narration, which is, I think, one of the life-changing tools that's a little bit buried underneath some of the business stuff. When people take out their phone in front of us, it is so common now for them to just disappear into the phone that we have a kind of separation anxiety that is getting worse and worse and worse, where we're with a human being. And this has happened to me during client meetings where someone takes out a phone and they start doing something. I have no idea what they're doing. I don't know if they're doing something related to something that I've asked them, or if they just have spaced out into their seductive technology. We, of course, do this with our children too, where we're sitting in a catatonic state in front of them and they don't know where we've gone and they don't know when we'll be back. So the simple, loving, and also very professional thing to do is to narrate where you're going and when you'll be back. So if you're in a business context, you can say, let me just look up that regional manager stat you just asked about. Or I'm just going to check my flights in Google. It's a wonderful thing. If you're at home, you say to your child, I'm just going to pick up the phone. I'm just checking to see the maps to the lake that we're going to. Or let me see if grandma's available for tomorrow. And by narrating, by the simple act of narrating, you've removed that mystery of, did my loved one / business colleague just evaporate in front of my eyes, or are they actually still with me in the room? And the funnest thing about this is if you do it with kids and family, they will very, very quickly start catching you and say, could you please narrate when you're not, when you're not doing it? Because then they get annoyed when you disappear. So I love that technique. I would like to get a giant hippie bus and travel the country on a phone narration proselytizing journey, because I think it would just make so much of a difference.
It means so much. I can just see how that would mean so much. I remember this from you talking about this or reading about it, because it meant so much to me thinking about it. So great stuff. So let's talk about you. So, Here we are. You're an advisor to many senior leaders. You're on the platform. I think the first time I saw you was quite a long time ago, actually, was at ISA, which is basically the presidents of learning organizations.
Oh, yeah.
And so we were in a fairly intimate setting with just CEOs and presidents of learning organizations. But you've come a long way. You've impacted many. Something we talk about here a lot is, if you're leading others, we got to think about leading ourselves. right? What are you doing to lead yourself? Maybe it's physically, maybe it's spiritually, maybe it's maritally or at home, but what are you doing so that you can serve others well?
There's a productivity guy named Mike Vardy who used an analogy last week that I love so much. He said the day should be like doing a jigsaw puzzle and you do the edges first and you work in from there. And I just thought that was such a beautiful way of describing routines and the importance of routines. So like most people, I have morning routines that involve meditation. For me, my new thing is the ice cold showers I've been trying. I'm up to 3 minutes of torture.
Right. How's that going?
In the shower. It is actually incredibly focusing and feel good after you get out. I've been very, very surprised at how much you look forward to it after a certain point. Not the during. Definitely not the during.
So basically,
during, but
just
the
so
after.
everybody knows, for you, just to give kind of a clue of what this is
yes,
like.
Yes, the Wim Hof cold shower.
Yes. So you do your cleaning and everything in a warm shower. You wash off or whatever you want to do. You might do if you did exercise before. And then you turn it to as cold as it will go and see how long you last. Is that your deal?
Yeah, I'm doing 3 minutes and that's long enough for now, but it's supposed to be really wonderful for immune system and metabolism and all sorts of other things, but it is incredibly intensely focusing. And that's the part that I like about it. So I believe that Tim Ferriss line, seize the morning, seize the day. I'm an intense morning person. So I like to set things up, make the bed, meditate, get my ducks in order, have some aspect of white space, even if it's just a minute to think about the day. Where I and many others, I think, are sloppier is that closing part of the puzzle. If Mike Vardy says you work in from both edges, I think I'm just working from the left. And so I've been in a lot of pondering about what are the closing rituals. Mike Hyatt has some wonderful closing rituals, and my closing ritual is usually my child interrupts me when they can hear that the last phone call is over, and that's not the closing ritual that I really want. But the one that I'm pretty good at and the one that we teach and I love is called Trap Yourself in a Promise. And it's just the most simple way of putting an end to work. When you walk out in front of whoever you live with, just say out loud, and I do this pretty much every day, well, done for the day. And as soon as I've said, oh, done for the day, little ears and husband ears have heard that. And even if you live alone, you can text a boundary buddy or you can say it out loud for your own ears to hear. And now I have made a line in the sand. Because if I just walk right back in and take another sip of the laptop, everybody's watching. And it's a really nice way of protecting myself from those tendencies to want to do more and want to work more.
Speaking of that, how are you, in this environment, and you do talk about technology and some of the, challenges in different way. How are you leading your kids? Tell us about your family, first of all. Husband, how many kids?
I have 3 boys, 11, 13, 15.
Right.
So
and so they're technology is something that we have to deal with our kids that our parents didn't have to deal with, right? So how are you guiding them in some of these things as far as white space and focus and well-roundedness?
The word interstitial is one I use a lot in my work, constantly convincing people that the interstitial use of space can be incredibly profitable and beneficial. But in my home, the word interstitial has a different meaning because that's the primary directive that I give my children is to avoid their screens interstitially. It's not that my kids don't watch videos or do a movie or do things that are screen-based, but what we're trying to do is compartmentalize the use. So you take out an iPad, you sit down, and you use it for some period of time, as opposed to, I eat a grape, oh, I just want to look something up. I walk outside, wait a second, I just want to see that D&D stat. And that interstitial use of I touch it, I put it down, gets to that time confetti that we're all so worried about now. I think that's Adam Grant's wonderful line about time confetti. So I've picked my battles over the years. I used to be more militant about screen stuff when they were littler, and now I understand that people have to participate in the world, but I'm always trying to get them to put it in a bucket, a little compartment, an hour at a time, 15 minutes at a time, and then can you put it away? We do put those things away at around 6 o'clock so that at around 6:01, everybody's eyes clear and they look around, they go, wow, a family.
Yeah.
Hey,
love it.
And therefore we're forced to interact in a different flavor in the last couple hours of the day.
How are you staying, you're leading others, and I've noticed like a great leader, you're quoting Adam Grant, and you talked about some others earlier because you're a continual learner, but how are you is there a consistent routine to staying fresh and relevant and capable and competent and continually learning? Is there a process there where you're reading, you're studying, or how is it that you have, keep in your mind putting good inputs in?
Relationships and deadlines would be the two things that come to mind. In building relationships, I learn a lot just from, if I'm really curious about my clients, if I'm really curious about how they feel, they're leading me to places where they have pain, and I need to go find them answers. And what was the second one I said? Relationships and
deadlines, which I think is fascinating. No one's ever said this before.
Yeah, for me, I need to reach down in the well and find something new every 2 weeks when I write. So I have a blog that's an every 2 week blog, and I have tons and tons of content that we put out. So in content creation, my dad used to say, they'll milk the cow, you put it there and something's going to come out. And so there's times where I sit down, I have 11 different video scripts to write or 2 blog posts, and then I have to start musing in the internet, finding out what's going on, finding out what's current and what's fresh. And then audiobooks are just always happening in a secondary
What's
channel.
One that you're thinking about
preferred.
right now? What's a favorite audiobook that you've listened to lately?
For development, I'm in love with Carey Nieuwhof stuff now with At Your Best. And I love the energy calendar. He has this wonderful calendar where you basically decide that there are green areas where you're going to be at your best energy, red and yellow based on your internal clock. My green areas are early in the morning. And so I shouldn't put difficult or challenging things in the afternoon because I'm only turned on green in the morning. It's just such a wonderful, helpful model. But whenever anybody asks about books, I always have to talk about fiction, because I believe fiction to be one of the very necessary food groups of a sane life. And so I'm constantly advocating for fiction because it's an activity that I consider white space adjacent. That if you have enough space in your personal life, you can get drawn into a beautiful book or a beautiful hobby. And that's a very, very important part of refueling and then coming back the next day full. So the current fiction that I'm in love with, I'm reading Prince of Tides, which I somehow missed and never read. And it's insane. It's like the creme brulee of writing. It's just yummy. Every sentence is so yummy.
Oh, there's so many more questions. I've only gotten to a few of like what I was thinking about, but let's go here. What about you? What's your biggest hope for the future? Your business, your life? What's something you're thinking about? Maybe it's bucket list, but maybe it's a hope for the future, either of your work, your family, or your life.
When I was, I'm going to guess, I don't know, mid-20s, I remember trying to figure out what I wanted to do for a living. And I opened up a newspaper and I thought, I think I want to be a social worker. And I remember very distinctly sitting in this apartment and seeing that a social worker made $8 an hour. And it doesn't feel like the most prideful story because there's people whose passion to serve has overridden that financial concern, but mine didn't. And I remember thinking, I don't really know if I can do that. I don't really know if I could make my life work on that. And I followed many other paths, but there was something about the original image of a social worker that would have been right for me, sitting with one human being at a time, hearing their story, meeting with them repeatedly, going deep in their world, and then seeing them change. And one of the problems with being a really big keynoter on these giant stages with 12,000 people, or having a company where you just get reports about the way that you're helping people, is I do feel divorced in a way that's painful for me from that social worker feeling. And I don't really know how to get it back. And so I'm trying to figure out, what does it look like to blend the success that we've had with getting me someplace, and maybe it's even through the foundation that we're building, but getting me someplace where I see regular people in a chair across from me in the flesh, and I help them and I hear them. And I honestly don't know how that's going to look, but it's missing for me. I think I was right at 21 in some ways about that.
I think there's something interesting. I was walking with a mentor of mine in the middle of the pandemic, and it was kind of like I'm asking him, am I gonna, we're talking through. He's someone who's in the White House a lot. He keeps below the radar. People ask for advice from him. He's 20 years, my senior. He for free. He doesn't ever take a paycheck, by the way, from any, whether it's presidents of countries or whatever. He doesn't whether he needs to or not. He wants to be, but he's invited to advise many. And I was fortunate. He happened to be at the college I was at, university, for the very short time that I happened to be there. Just the 4 years I was there, and he kind of took me under his wing, whatever that was, 30 years ago, 27 years ago. And we've stayed friends. He's still definitely a friend and a mentor. But he said something as we walked. And I was thinking, talking through, am I going to have to let people go? Am I going to, these things in the pandemic that we didn't know what we were going to do with our business. And fortunately, many things turned out better than we ever might have dreamed at the time. But he said something. He said, David, small is beautiful, and it's going to be more beautiful. And he said, I could see you, and he named someone that we would all know, and I don't think I should do that right here. But basically, he said, you speak to thousands of people and do all these kind of things. And of course, out of the Institute, we do research and we certify people and we do consulting with the Enterprise Trust Index and all those things. But me, commonly, I'm I'm on the platform, or I'm in the boardroom, or I'm on the executive day. And he said he named somebody that only speaks 6 times a year now, and he used to speak to thousands and thousands and thousands at a time. And yet he makes more, frankly, money and impact basically by kind of mentoring or co-mentoring this group of about 6 to 10 and senior leaders that many people have heard of on this show. And so I've been thinking about the same thing. So I just really appreciate it. We're calling it the trust table. In another phase for me, I do actually like to speak. I like to inspire. I like to shift thinking. I don't just like that, though. I like to have a place where people go after that to have long-term reinforcement and change, and that's our certification and everything. But I think for me personally, this trust table idea, you just ignited it, and I wasn't going to talk about this, but I've been thinking about it, and we're similar in that where I love that ongoing long-term, smaller relationship of change that can happen. For whatever it's worth. One other thing came to mind, not to jump back on me, but you talked about like commitments some, and how you say, done for the day, and how that kind of gives public accountability. So you may not have heard this, but I in a time when I didn't necessarily have that much money, over a decade ago, I said publicly, if I'm not 50 pounds less, or if I'm not my high school weight by May 1st of that year, I'll give give my staff $2,500. Okay. So I said this publicly, not knowing exactly how I was going to do it, but knowing that money, frankly, was so important for me then. There's no way I wouldn't let that, figure it out. And that commitment, I came in at 3 pounds less than I had to. I was like, I'll starve the last week, right?
Spitting in a cup.
Yeah, I know. I went up a little bit again. So interestingly enough, my team knows it. I just made a commitment. I have to give $5,000 to somebody if I'm not, because I'd gone just up, not like that, but gone up a little bit again, and knowing I want to be back to that lean because I feel better. And when for me, if I make a commitment out loud to people, like I have to keep it, and so I have to figure out how to, that last part, by the way, is the toughest part. But all I'm saying is that public commitment, whether it's for space with your family, which is important, done for the day, or I'm going to do this. Of course, it only works if you're the kind of person that will keep the commitment or feels responsibility toward that. For StrengthsFinder, my number one is responsibility. I know people that have made that commitment back to me saying, I love that idea. And they've never, they haven't said a thing. And of course, it hasn't meant much. But anyway, I've really enjoyed this. And Juliet, I really appreciate the good you've brought to the world, and from afar, even hearing speaking, and also in some ways aligned on this journey to speak, train, equip, coach, consult, and really hopefully move people toward better. And so where can everybody find out more about you? There's a whole lot more to what you're doing at Juliet Funt Group.
JulietFunt.com is a website, and they can go there. They can get the first chapter of the book for free at the top of the homepage, or they can also subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter, which is that every other week blog.
Perfect. And you can find out a whole lot more. We'll put that all in the show notes. Last question. It is the Trusted Leader Show. Who's a leader you trust and why?
Oh, it's funny. I think of people in a lot of different categories, and leader is never one of them. My head goes, I have keynote friends, author friends, teacher friends, trainer friends, consultant friends. But I think Craig Groeschel is the one that comes to mind, who's a mutual guy that we know from GLN. He's a pastor and also a leadership expert. And I think that when a leader is somebody that you trust, you feel really safe for reasons that you can't explain. I just feel great. I can be around him and be completely myself, raw, vulnerable, good, broken, fancy, not fancy, that just wonderful sense. And I think he's just one of the most brilliant minds. He's really making this crossover now from faith-based focus to a dual focus of faith and corporate, and he's going to be huge. He's brilliant.
Yeah. And what you said, I think maybe the first word that comes to mind for me with him is authentic and willing to be vulnerable, willing to share. Hey, I've struggled too. I'm trying to lead at home, at work, executives. So, yes, great example. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your time and mind and everything else with us. And thanks for being my friend. That is the Trusted Leader Show. Yes, thank you. That's the Trusted Leader Show for this time. Until next time, stay trusted.